What is something scary that has happened to you that you cannot explain rationally? I used to work doing maintenance at historic properties. There was a historic house museum I worked at when it wasn't open to the public. It was part of a whole landmark site. There was a visitor center with offices, and then the house was about half a mile up a dirt road in a wooded area. Sometimes I worked with a crew, but there were a lot of times I was there alone. One winter day, when it was really cloudy and dark, I was working alone to get ready to replace some electrical work on the exterior of the house. I went inside and turned off the circuit to the whole property, and I tested it. It was off. I locked the doors and went outside to work. After about an hour, I got down from my ladder and started walking around the house, and then one of the lights inside the house turned on. I started to freak out, but thought that maybe someone was playing a joke on me. I called the visitor center on my walkie-talkie, and confirmed that the only other person who was working that day was still there and hadn't left, and that all the keys to the house were present and accounted for. That's when I freaked out and ran the half-mile up to the office. I made my coworker come back with me to check out what was going on, but when we got to the house, the light was off again, but the bulb was still warm. All the doors were still locked and the circuit was still off. Still gives me shivers to this day. When I was 6 years old, I had a cat named Buster. He was actually my stepdad's cat, but because I had never had a cat before, I claimed him as my own. Suffice it to say, he didn't like being hugged and coddled all the time by a little child, so he hated me. He avoided me at all costs. He was also an outdoor cat, so he would often spend most days outside and then come in for the night. One night, he didn't come back into the house. We usually fed him at night, so I was worried. Our area was also well known for an abundance of coyotes. My parents were being a bit hush-hush about his disappearance, but I didn't get the hint. That night, when I was drifting off to sleep, Buster jumped onto my bed. He lay down by my head and let me pet him until I fell asleep. Honestly, I was shocked because he had never done this before. The next morning, I triumphantly walked downstairs and told my parents that Buster now loved me because he slept in my bed during the night. My parents looked at me inquisitively and sat me down at the breakfast table to let me know that while they were outside the night before, they had found his body in the alley behind our house. They thought he had been harassed by a coyote, but he was lifeless, so he couldn't have slept in my bed that night. To this day, I like to think that Buster just wanted to say goodbye and thank me for trying to love him in the only way a child knew how. When I was in university, I lived by myself. It was a nice little studio unit behind a house in a fairly decent area. I would honestly think nothing of walking places at night. There was a 24-hour McDonald's and a 7-Eleven that I would walk to, often between 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. since I was a massive night owl. Well, one day after finishing an essay at about 2 in the morning, I decided I was hungry but didn't really have anything easy to cook, so I decided to walk down to the 7-Eleven and grab a pie or something. However, as soon as I opened my door, I was overcome by a suffocating feeling of fear. My heart started pounding, I started shaking, the works. Telling myself that this was ridiculous, I walked out to the street with the intent to still go, but that was as far as I got. I was terrified for no reason that I could understand, but no less intensely despite that. I ran back inside and ate dry cereal. Later the next day, I heard about a group of drunk guys that were causing havoc down near the intersection at the 7-Eleven. They'd beaten up someone from my university. Even though I can't explain it, I'm convinced something bad would have happened to me that night if I had ignored that feeling and gone anyway. I live in a condominium and we own 2 apartments on the 7th and 8th floor. The only way to move between them is to step out of the apartment, take the elevator or the staircase and enter the other one. One night, we ran out of ice cream upstairs and my mom told me to go get some from the downstairs freezer, so I took the keys to the 7th floor's apartment, and since it was dinner time, no one was there. I walked into the pitch dark and realized that someone was sitting on the sofa, so I flipped the switch to see my dad just sitting there. It was kinda weird, but I just went to get the ice cream and asked if he had a key to lock up. No answer. I shrugged and thought, well, if he came in and locked the door behind him, he must have one. Went back upstairs and my dad was sitting there eating dinner. I freaked out and asked how the heck he got up here so fast, and everyone told me that he's been here all this time. Told them it wasn't possible because I just saw him downstairs, but no one believed me. Now I never go down there alone. In my childhood home, I would often hear touch typing coming from the computer downstairs early in the mornings. I didn't think much of it at first, as my parents worked from home and it wouldn't be uncommon to wake up in the morning to hear Mom typing away at the computer. One day I got up and called out to Mom, assuming she was down there working as I could hear typing. No answer. No one was down there at all. I was sure I heard typing. This began happening regularly. I figured I was so used to hearing typing from downstairs that I was hearing things that weren't there, so I didn't mention anything to anyone, figuring I was going a bit crazy. This happened on and off over a period of 6 months. The sound of fast typing and fast, furious clicking of a mouse as if someone was frustrated. One morning I was eating my breakfast when I heard Mom at the top of the stairs call out to me, "You're not down there on that computer already?" I froze and ran out to her. I was amazed she had heard it too. She was convinced she could hear typing, yet no one was down there. I told her about all the times I'd been hearing it, and then my sister opened up about hearing it regularly too when no one was down there. I wasn't crazy after all. I set out to try to catch whatever was causing it and to try to discover a rational explanation for it. I'd sprint out of my bedroom to the top of the stairs where I was able to look down into the room to see if anyone was at the computer. No such luck. Every time I got there it stopped. I think it went on for a couple of years and we learned just to kind of live with it as it wasn't every day. I was down there once when the ceiling light globe in the center of the room began flashing very fast, strobe-like. It then exploded and glass went shattering all across the room. I was lucky I ran out of the room when it started happening because I was scared, the whole mysterious typing, you know. If I hadn't run, I would have been hit with bits of light bulb. Around that same time, I was on the computer at home by myself when something happened that resulted in me never being alone in that room again. I felt and heard this really sharp intake of breath directly behind my right shoulder near my ear. I've never run so fast in my life and was hesitant to go in that room ever again. Prior to that, the whole typing thing had just been something weird and a bit spooky, not scary. Still makes my heart race when I think about it today. I have never really encountered anything like this before or since all those events. I don't particularly believe in ghosts either, but I'm open to the possibilities of something that scientists don't have a proper explanation for yet. Hunter/mountaineer here. It was a chilly December morning. I hiked in, pre-dawn, taking about an hour and a half to go 3 miles off the beaten trails. Got to my nest about half an hour before sunrise and started to settle in. The wind kicked up and a fog rolled and that was thicker than milk. Within a few minutes, my visibility was 5 feet. I'm sitting tight, huddled up against the freezing wind when I start to hear twigs snapping close to me. For no apparent reason, what is normally a rapturous sound indicative of an imminently successful hunt, sent a frosty chill down my spine. I chambered around in my rifle as quietly as I could, and lay flat on my back tucked against a fallen tree. The rustling was moving closer through the fog, but I couldn't see anything. The sun was starting to peek over the mountains to my east and visibility was starting to increase. The rustling of twigs and leaves was sporadic, sometimes directly in front of me, sometimes behind or beside me. I remember laying there, rifle across my chest, thinking to myself how silly it was to react like such a coward. I rationed with myself that bears and mountain lions are a rarity where I was, and I had likely stumbled into a herd of whitetail that had bedded down. I decided to sit up. The rustling stopped immediately. As it was fully dawn by now, I was looking through the fog for the outline of my prey, which I had assured myself was literally all around me. It wasn't. Seemingly, nothing was. By now, the fog had faded away and it was apparent to me that I was alone in those woods. I hunted all that day without seeing so much as a squirrel. Around 3 in the afternoon, after fighting the wind and an abnormally cold day, and not wanting to hike out by flashlight, I decided it was time to start back to the truck. Walking out of those woods was the most uneasy I have ever felt. Lawfully, once you make it back to the trail, you're supposed to clear the chamber of your rifle. Not that day. What is normally a stroll through the woods, I undertook with the seriousness of an animal being stalked. I would walk, then stop and listen. I never heard or saw anything during my retreat, but I could feel eyes on me. I was about 100 feet away from my truck, when I rounded the last corner and saw, hanging at eye level from a tree by a noose, a stuffed bear in a blaze orange jacket. I'm a giant, broad-shouldered outdoorsman, but that one shook me something fierce. Pretty sure I lived in a haunted house for a while. Strange things. For one, I always felt like I was being watched in my room, and if I had the door open to the hallway, I would swear I'd see someone walk by out of the corner of my eye. We had 2 cats and sometimes they'd be in my room sleeping and then all of a sudden they would sit bolt upright and stare at the door, and nothing I did could move them for a long time. This happened often. One day in my bathroom, the shelf that had my sister's beauty stuff randomly lost hold of all the items. The thing was, the shelf wasn't loose or hanging and all the stuff had to bounce out of a 2-inch-high lip into the sink. One time in the middle of the night, my sister's 100-plus-year-old dresser she got as a gift from our grandma just fell over. This thing weighed a ton and it was built like a tank. My sister said she heard the sound of someone pushing. Mom and sister used to yell at me for sneaking around the house, only I wasn't home or I was in my room. They said they saw a man in the shadows that was about my height. One day we also ran into the old owner and my mom casually asked the lady if she had ever experienced anything in the house. The lady's expression changed and she said that no one believed her, but yes, she experienced a lot of stuff. I moved out around that time. I do not miss that place. I came home from class at around 11:30 a.m. and no one else was home. I hung out at home for a bit and at 2:30 p.m. I was overcome with sleepiness. Being the bum that I am, I lay down in my bed and set a timer on my phone for a 20-minute nap. I fell asleep quickly and after around 5 minutes, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening and had a split second of panic before my dog jumped up onto my bed and lay down next to me. I fell back asleep. After another 5 minutes of sleep, I instantly jolted awake because I was certain there was someone standing next to my bed, behind me. I assumed it was my mother, who would likely be pissed that I was sleeping in the middle of the day. I woke up and turned around in one movement and there was no one there. Weird. I checked my phone and had another 8 minutes of sleep left. I went back to sleep only to be woken by my phone ringing. It was my mother. She said that my great-aunt, who had been in the hospital after a stroke-like event for a week, had died around 1 o'clock. My mom then said she knew my aunt was going to die today because she had seen a wraith, a sort of ghost, usually warning of someone dying, that morning. My mom is Scottish and very superstitious, but I don't believe in any of that. She said that when she woke up that morning to take my brother to school, she went into my room to see if I was still asleep and saw a wraith standing next to my bed. My brain just freaked out. When I was a younger kid, I had a really hard time getting to sleep and I normally got to bed really late at night. My mom has always been that way too. So, my mom mentioned that she heard something at night and wanted me to stay up a little longer to hear it. I did, it was summer anyway. Fast forward to that night, it was about 1 a.m. My mom said it usually happens during her nighttime routine, so she told me to sit in the living room and listen while she went to brush her teeth. That's when I heard it. There were footsteps upstairs. You could hear the footsteps start at the window in my parents' room then walk away towards the other bedroom, my baby sister's. It sounded muffled until the footsteps arrived at the landing of the stairs, then it got louder because the landing was hardwood floor. After a few steps, you would hear the footsteps on the carpet again when they arrived at my sister's room. But this time, they didn't go all the way to the window. They went to my sister's crib and paused for a moment, before continuing back to the window in my parents' room. I listened to this for about 5 to 10 minutes, with the footsteps taking about a minute to go from the window, to the crib, and back. My mom then came out of the bathroom and said, "I told you I heard something." Well, we then opened the door and it stopped completely for the night, as far as we know at least. The next night I did the same thing and heard it again. So I opened up the door and sent our dogs up, a German Shepherd and a Border Collie, who got to the top of the stairs and immediately turned around and bolted down the stairs. My stepdad was there that night, and quickly ran upstairs after the dogs came down and looked everywhere. There was not a single place he didn't look, there was nothing to be found and the windows were still locked. Couldn't explain it for years, and the neighbors that moved in after us apparently heard the same footsteps. 7 years ago I lived in a 2-story farmhouse. It was built in 1908 and was both large and old. I was packing clothes and putting them in a small and used bedroom. I was wearing my MP3 player and, the last time I checked, it showed 3/4 battery life. I was on my 4th, or so, trip and was hauling a load of shirts on hangers. It occurred to me the closet was empty too. Perfect, I'll just hang them back up in there. This closet was almost a second room. It had a short glossy wooden door. The area was thrice as long as wide, with hardwood floors. The lacquer still smelled, even though I'm sure it was fresh 100 years ago. I ducked fully inside and thought, this is a weird little place to be. Suddenly, the music doubled in volume and changed to something that wasn't music. It was like, I don't even know, rapid nonsense. Fast electronic babbling. It scared the entire heck out of me. I flew straight out, looked at my player and it was dead. I'm a pretty rational guy. That MP3 player would sometimes show more battery life than it actually had. it's done that before. And maybe the sounds were some sort of malfunction before shutting down. I don't really believe in ghosts, but I'm telling you, it shocked and frightened me to the core. My skin felt electric for an hour after. I never felt comfortable in that room again. So a few years back, probably 6 to 7 years, my family was living in our previous home. This was our second house we had in Ohio. The first house was about 2 streets over from our second house. Well, one night my mom woke me up and was acting really panicked. She grabbed my brother, who was probably 5 at the time, and told me to go outside. It was about 4 in the morning, and once we all got outside my dad tried to calm my mom down. He asked her what was wrong, and she explained that she had a dream that we were all going to die from carbon monoxide poisoning if we stayed in the house. Then my dad told her that all the detectors were working perfectly fine and we decided to go back inside. We didn't smell anything nor did the detectors go off, so we went to bed. The next day my mom was watching the morning news before we went to school. The first story for the day was that a local family was rushed out of their home because of a carbon monoxide leak in their home, which could have been just a coincidence, but then the news station showed the house. It was our old house that we had just moved out of. There are actually a few stories that are pretty supernatural that I have about my family, but this is the shortest one to be honest. My stories come from the last house I lived in with my parents. Quick bit of creepy background on the house, may or may not be in any way related to the weird things that happened. There was one really strange thing we discovered about the house not long after moving in. Above the back door, there are pipes that are connected through to the bathroom upstairs. The previous owners had decided to hide the pipes by building cupboards over them. The cupboards were purely cosmetic, inside they had no shelves and nothing on the bottom, the pipes just ran along the inside bottom of the cupboards totally exposed. So you have this row of pretty inaccessible cupboards built over the back door that are functionless, can't be used to store anything in them. They just have a row of pipes running inside them along the bottom. Anyway, we had to get some plumbing work done. The plumbers went into the cupboards, and below the pipes, lying in the bottom of the cupboards obscured from view, was a very large kebab shop knife, about 10 inches long, wrapped up in newspaper, just left there. It was the only thing in there. Never figured out why it had been put there. I was 16 at the time, I'm 29 now, and asked my parents if they'd take it to the police. They said no. I guess they didn't think it would go anywhere, or perhaps just didn't want to risk finding out something bad about the place given we'd literally just moved in a few months earlier. My dad still has the knife in the house somewhere. So, on to the experiences. Once, I was in the kitchen with my dad. He was across the room with his back to me. Suddenly, he turns around and says, "Did you just push past me?" I was stood about 6 feet away from him at the time, minding my own business. Nobody else around. "No," I told him. "I just felt something push past me," he says, "not brush, push." I was once in my room, probably about 19 or 20 years old. It was afternoon and there was a massive storm outside. I love storms, so decided to watch from my window. Torrential rain, heavy enough you'd be instantly soaked the moment you stepped outside. Lightning too. Storms don't scare or spook me. I love them. Anyway, while I was sat looking out of my window at the storm, I hear what sounds like a couple of little girls laughing/chatting from the direction of the corner of my room behind me. It sounds a little faint or distant, but still clear enough that there was no mistaking what I heard. My bedroom door was closed, roughly where I heard the noise come from. I got up to investigate. First I looked up and down the street in both directions, and there was nobody out there, as I expected given how heavy the rain was. There were no kids living with either of my neighbors who might have gone in their garden to play in the rain. And at the time this happened it was only me and my dad living in the house. He was out. There was no TV or radio on. There was nobody around and I couldn't figure out where the hell the laughter/voices came from. Getting away from the house for a minute, and going much further back in time, my family, sister and parents, were on holiday. I'd guess I was between 8 and 10. We were in our hotel room and suddenly, from behind all of us, we hear a voice loudly whisper my dad's name. We all heard it at the same moment. Shortly afterwards the radio switched itself on. When I went to turn it off, I found the switch already in the off position. I had to switch it on first, and then back off to shut it up. These are most of the strange things that have happened to me personally. But going back to the house, my parents and sister all experienced other strange things, much more than me in fact. For example, my dad, who has lived in the house alone for almost 10 years now, recently heard a voice come from behind him when he was in the hallway one afternoon. It didn't say any words, but just seemed to make a garbled whispering kind of noise. He turned around and nothing was there, of course. My dad was stood in the living room reading some paperwork. He works from home. It was daytime. Suddenly, he saw a little golf ball-sized ball of dim light, whitish in color, appear about chest level in front of him, circle halfway round him, then vanish. My mum has chronic fatigue syndrome. At one point, to try and help with it, she was taking these 15-minute rests throughout the day. The whole point of the rest was to stay fully awake, not to nap. She would lie down on her bed with her eyes closed, but not feeling sleepy or drifting off into brief sleep, ensuring she stayed completely with it. And when she did this, she would sometimes hear footsteps moving around the bed. Middle of the day. None of us anywhere near the room she was in. Several times my sister reported being in my dad's office, the computer room, for us kids, and the printer suddenly switching on at the same time as the room temperature dropped. My sister reported feeling something sit on her bed while she was in it several times. It wasn't sat on her, but she felt its weight shifting the mattress and said she could even feel an indentation in the mattress where it was sometimes. There are other things, but I think that'll do for now. Just wanted to share as I've had so much excitement reading about other people's experiences and felt like I should give back what I could. I was working at a hotel in Albuquerque, the graveyard shift. I had been talking to the security guard and he asked if he could get a ride home, so instead of waiting for 30 minutes for my shift to end, I just left a note for my boss that said I left early because my brother was stranded outside of town and needed me to get him. A total lie on my part, but I needed a good excuse to leave early. I dropped off the security guard at his place, then went home and went to sleep. A couple of hours later, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my brother. He told me he was stranded outside of town and he needed me to go get him. I told my brother the lie I had told my boss and what a coincidence his calling me was. He said that wasn't weird and that he would show me what was weird when I got there. I got there and asked him what was weird. He put his phone up to my ear and played a message that he'd gotten when he woke up that morning. It was a voice that kinda sounded computerized but was mostly just creepy sounding. It said, "You're stuck." That freaked us both out. I never figured out where the call came from. The strangest, creepiest thing that's ever happened to me in my life.